So in the NFL, it is crucial to hit on your draft picks, especially in the first round, because you're going to be investing so much money into these players over the course of their rookie contracts and after that. But sometimes it just doesn't work out for you. So for today's video, we're going to look at every team's worst draft pick since the year 2015. And we are going to start off with the Las Vegas Raiders / Oakland Raiders. And man, there's a ton of different players that you could talk about here. Maybe Tyree Wilson is going to be in these conversations. Alex Leatherwood was a horrible first round pick back in 2021. Henry Ruggs in 2020, same with Damon Arnett. Garyon Conley didn't work out. Carl Joseph didn't work out. But I'm going to talk about Clelin Ferrell, who went 4th overall in the 2019 draft. And honestly, it was very shocking at the time when he did go number 4 overall. Now, he did spend 4 years in Oakland / Vegas, so they were able to get most of him on his rookie contract. He spent the 2023 season with the San Francisco 49ers, and he spent the 2024 season with the Washington Commanders. He did have 4.5 sacks in his rookie year, but it went downhill ever since after that, and there was just a ton of talent that went after him after going number 4 overall. It was still early in the John Gruden, Mike Mayock era, and the players that went after Ferrell: Devin White, Joshua Hines-Allen, TJ Hawkinson, Ed Oliver, Jonah Williams, Rashawn Gary, Christian Wilkins, Chris Lindstrom. A ton of different players went after him, and honestly, all the DNs that went after him were a lot better as well, including Brian Burns and Montez Sweat. So yeah, like I said, there's a bunch of different Raiders that you could pick here. You could talk about Henry Ruggs, you could talk about Alex Leatherwood. I'm just going with Ferrell because he was drafted the highest there at number 4 overall, and a lot more talent at the same position went after him. Since 2015, the Kansas City Chiefs have done a very good job drafting. They selected Marcus Peters in the first round back in 2015, Chris Jones in the second round in 2016, a guy by the name of Patrick Mahomes, you may have heard of him, in the first round in 2017. We're going to talk about their first round pick though. After winning the Super Bowl in 2019 against the Niners, we're going to talk about Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who was the running back on one of the more exciting college football teams of this century, that 2019 LSU team that had Joe Burrow, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire was the running back, and he was productive in his rookie year. He had 800 yards on 181 carries. He averaged 4.4 yards per attempt, 61 yards per game, but it went down after that. In 2021, in year number 2, he just played 10 games, 517 yards, 10 games in 2022, just 300 yards. Then in 2023, he lost his starting role completely. He just had 223 yards and was getting outplayed by a day 3 running back by the name of Isaiah Pacheco, and is now with the New Orleans Saints. And there were so many better running backs that also went after Clyde Edwards-Helaire, most notably Jonathan Taylor, who was 9 picks later, even DeAndre Swift, who was 3 picks later. Gotta go with Paxton Lynch here for the Denver Broncos, a good old-fashioned quarterback bust in the first round. He was a little bit of a surprising pick too at the end of the first round coming out of Memphis. A lot of people did not think that he should have been a first rounder at the time, but the Broncos were desperately trying to find their post-Peyton Manning franchise quarterback. He reminded John Elway a lot of himself, and Paxton Lynch only started 5 games in the NFL. He had a 1-3 record. He had 79 completions on 128 attempts, 61% completion percentage, and he threw for 792 yards. Yeah, somebody that went 26th overall in the 2016 draft just had 792 passing yards in his career. Other notable quarterbacks that went in that draft, obviously higher than him, were Jared Goff and Carson Wentz, but Dak Prescott went after him. Even Jacoby Brissett would have been a much better pick, and he ended up going 91st overall. So yeah, not a good job by John Elway evaluating QB talent back in 2016. I think this is going to be a pretty easy one here for the LA Chargers. We're going to talk about Quentin Johnston, who was the 21st overall pick back in the 2023 draft. He was the second receiver off the board in that class, went 1 pick ahead of Zay Flowers, 2 picks ahead of Jordan Addison, and Quentin Johnston did not have a good rookie year. He dropped a ton of deep balls. He had 38 catches for just 431 yards that year. He averaged just 25 yards per game, and then he was pretty much demoted to the wide receiver 2 in 2024 because they added Ladd McConkey. But honestly, he did improve. He did have 55 catches for 711 yards, had some better games as well. But honestly, when you're looking at all their top draft picks, it's really hard to pick the LA Charger. They've done a good job drafting high in the draft, and I would say Quentin Johnston is one of their few underwhelming talents in the first round, because if you go back to 2015, Melvin Gordon, 2016, Joey Bosa, you could maybe talk about Mike Williams, 7th overall in 2017, but he had his moments. Derwin in 2018, Tillery in 2019, Herbert in 2020. So yeah, I think by default you can go with Quentin Johnston unless you're completely out on Zion Johnson. You could talk about a couple different guys. For the Seattle Seahawks, you could talk about LJ Collier, you could talk about Jermaine Afidi, but I'm going to talk about a running back that they took in the first round in the 2018 draft, Rashad Penny, who did spend 5 years in Seattle. He did get his 5th year option picked up. He never had over 750 rushing yards in a single year, and he was banged up a ton as well. He did play 14 games as a rookie, but 10 games in year 2, 3 games in year 3, 10 games in year 4, and 5 games in year 5. Just not the production you want for a first-round running back who went 27th overall, and some good players went after him as well, including Lamar Jackson, 32nd overall. Or hey, if you wanted a running back that high, Nick Chubb went 35th overall. He would have been a much better selection. So yeah, Seahawks fans, you can let me know who you think your team's worst draft pick is since 2015. This is a really easy one here for the San Francisco 49ers. We're going to talk about Trey Lance. They gave up 3 first-round picks, including theirs in the 2021 draft, to go up and select the North Dakota State quarterback who played less than 30 collegiate games. And Trey Lance, very similar to Paxton Lynch, did not start many games for the team that drafted him. He went 3rd overall. It's not like there was some great quarterbacks that went after him, but still, that 2021 NFL draft's top 10, or the first half of that first round, is going to go down in the history books. And the 49ers took a quarterback that just started basically 4 games for them, 2 in his rookie year, 2 in 2022, and he got outplayed by the Mr. Irrelevant pick 1 year later in 2022 by Brock Purdy. Trey Lance is going to be on his 3rd team now of his career. He signed with the Chargers this offseason after being a 3rd-string quarterback in Dallas last year, and I do wonder if he's ever going to be a consistent starter one day. He's still just 24 years old, but yeah, it was never going to work out in San Fran. There were 2 guys that I was deciding between here for the Arizona Cardinals. You could talk about Josh Rosen, who was selected 10th overall in a good quarterback class back in 2018, and he definitely showed some flashes in his rookie year, but he was playing for such an abysmal Cardinals team. They had the worst record in the NFL, so they decided to draft Kyler Murray a year later, and then Rosen was basically out of the league after 2021, but he really never got a chance to develop in the NFL. I'm actually going to go with Isaiah Simmons, who everybody was high on in the 2020 draft because of his flexibility and versatility on the defensive side of the field. Could he be a linebacker? Could he be a safety? He could play all over, and it just didn't really work out in Arizona whatsoever. He did start 7 games in his rookie year, 17 games in year 2, and 13 games in year 3. He had 2 sacks one year, 1.5 sacks the other year, and 4 sacks in his final year in Arizona. And he definitely did make some plays. He ended up transitioning into a safety for the New York Giants, but for somebody that was drafted 8th overall in that 2020 draft, with some other defensive standouts that went after him like AJ Terrell and Patrick Queen, you have to think that Arizona would have liked to have that pick back. But honestly, the non-skill position picks back in that 2020 draft have not aged the best. Now, this is one of the more interesting teams we're going to talk about in this video, the Los Angeles Rams, because their first round picks were Todd Gurley in 2015, Jared Goff in 2016, and then they didn't have another first-round pick until 2024 when they took Jared Verse. This was from the Matthew Stafford trades and the Jalen Ramsey trade. So it actually came down between 2 players, either Tutu Atwell, who was the 57th overall pick in the 2021 draft, or Cam Akers, who was drafted in the 2nd round as well in the 2020 draft. And I think I'm going to end up going with Tutu Atwell just because guys that are so much better at the wide receiver position were selected after him, like Nico Collins or Amon-Ra St. Brown. And Jonathan Taylor was off the board when the Rams took Cam Akers back in 2020, and his career was pretty much derailed by injuries as well. Tutu Atwell never really had a breakout year by any means. He was productive at some times in 2024 with all the injuries there in Los Angeles. He ended up signing a noticeable 1-year deal with them at one point as well. But yeah, Tutu Atwell at 5'9", 165 pounds was probably not worth it in the 2021 draft. It would have been a lot more exciting to see Nico Collins playing with Matthew Stafford or Amon-Ra St. Brown. For the Pittsburgh Steelers, it came down between 2 players, either Devin Bush, who they traded up for in the 2019 draft, but I'm going to go with the quarterback that they took with the 20th overall pick in the 2022 draft, Kenny Pickett. Honestly, if he didn't do the fake slide, maybe he does not even go in the first round here. The Steelers also like Kenny Pickett because he played at the University of Pittsburgh, so they didn't really have to pay a lot for their scouts to travel to see Kenny Pickett play in the ACC that year. Kenny Pickett, though, as the Steelers quarterback, did have a 15-10 record because Mike Tomlin could pretty much go above 500 with any quarterback, and he had 13 touchdowns in Pittsburgh and 13 interceptions as well. It just never worked out in Pittsburgh, and to give Kenny Pickett the benefit of the doubt, he did have Matt Canada as his offensive coordinator, so who knows, maybe Patrick Mahomes never would have succeeded with that offensive coordinator for 2 years. And I do think it set the Steelers back a little bit at the quarterback position because in 2024, they had to throw out Justin Fields and Russell Wilson, and now here in 2025, the moment I'm recording this, their quarterback room is Mason Rudolph on a comeback and reunion, Will Howard, and Skylar Thompson. Yeah, I don't think that's a recipe for success. Honestly, I was kind of surprised for the Cleveland Browns. They've done an okay job drafting since 2015. It was before that where they had some really bad picks. I got to go with Corey Coleman here, who I liked a ton coming out of Baylor in that 2016 draft, but he only spent 2 years in Cleveland. He played 18 games. He had 131 targets across 2 years, 56 catches, 718 yards across 2 years as well, and had 5 receiving touchdowns. I thought he was going to be a great slot receiver for this team, but he gets drafted in 2016, and that team under Hugh Jackson Jackson went 1-15. So it's not like he was in a good environment whatsoever. He had Cody Kessler, Josh McCown, and Robert Griffin III as his quarterbacks that year. And then in 2017, they went 0-16. So yeah, Corey Coleman's record with Hugh Jackson was basically 1-33. Yeah, it wasn't great. It wasn't a good situation for him to succeed. Deshaun Kaiser went 0-15 that year, led the NFL in interceptions with 22, but he's going to be my selection here for the worst Browns draft pick since 2015. For the Baltimore Ravens, a team that has drafted well in the first round for a while, you got to talk about Hayden Hurst, though. A tight end out of South Carolina they took with the 25th overall pick in the 2018 draft, and he only spent 2 years in Baltimore. It didn't work out with Max Williams, and then it didn't work out with Hayden Hurst, who just had 13 catches for 163 yards as a rookie, and then just 30 catches for 349 yards as a sophomore, and then was no longer on the Ravens after that. They also took Mark Andrews in the 3rd round in the same draft, and he was a much better selection. So, hey, they could have taken somebody different. Maybe they could have taken Calvin Ridley or Nick Chubb or somebody like that. They did end up taking Lamar Jackson 32nd overall. They could have added to Lamar Jackson a little bit more, but instead they took a bust of a tight end with the 25th overall pick. And for the Cincinnati Bengals, when they've been drafting in the top 10 since 2015, hey, they hit on the Joe Burrow pick, they hit on the Jamar Chase pick, but with the 9th overall pick in the 2017 draft, they did not hit on it. They took the speedster out of Washington, John Ross, who was a combine standout, and he broke the 40-yard dash record. He went on to have just 1 start in 2017. He had 2 targets. In year number 2 in 2018, he had 58 targets, 21 catches for 210 yards. An improvement in 2019, where he was a deep ball threat. He did have 3 touchdowns after having 7 the year prior, 28 catches, but for 506 yards, more than doubled his receiving total on just 7 more receptions from the year prior, but then just 3 games played in 2020. Played with the Giants in 2021. He did not have a snap in 2022 or 2023, and then just had a few in 2024 with the Philadelphia Eagles. And there were some solid receiving targets that went after John Ross, guys like Cooper Kupp, George Kittle, Chris Godwin, Juju Smith-Schuster, or hey, maybe they could have taken a running back like Alvin Kamara or a tight end like Evan Ingram. The Green Bay Packers are also another team that drafts late in the first round every year, and they honestly do hit on more picks than not. I'm going to talk about Demarius Randall for this team. I almost went with A.J. Dillon, who was a 2nd rounder. Packers fans, you can let me know who you think your worst draft pick is since 2015. Randall did give them some good reps, but only played there for 3 years, from 2015 to 2017. He was the 30th overall pick back in 2015, so a super late pick. What makes it look a little bit worse is because 3 picks later was Landon Collins, who is a much better player in the NFL than Demarius Randall. Randall did get 3 interceptions in his first year, 3 in year 2, and 4 in year 3, but he really wasn't the best coverage corner / safety hybrid in the world after that. But like I said, Packers fans, you can let me know who you think your worst draft pick is. Do you think it's going to end up being Jordan Morgan? So for the Minnesota Vikings, we're going to go with Lewis Cine, who was the 32nd overall pick in the 2022 draft. He spent 2 years in Minnesota, just played 3 games as a rookie in 2022, 7 games as a sophomore in 2023, and then was let go by the Minnesota Vikings in August of 2024. And injuries did derail his time over there in Minnesota. He ended up appearing in 1 game in 2024 for the Buffalo Bills. Jalen Petre, Jaquan Brisker were a few notable safeties that went after him in this draft. Or hey, how about Kirby Joseph, who went 97th overall in this class? Tariq Woolen, if they wanted a corner, or Deron Bland also went much later in this draft in the 5th round. Man, the Lions have been such a good drafting team over the last decade, but they did whiff on the 3rd overall pick from the 2020 draft. They thought they were getting a lockdown corner in Jeff Okudah, but it did not work out for them. He only spent 3 years there, and he was definitely outshined in this first round by AJ Terrell coming out of Clemson. Okudah played 9 games as a rookie, 1 game as a sophomore, and then played 15 games in year number 3. He did bounce around on Atlanta and Houston over the last 2 years, and I do think he's going to be at worst a depth corner in this league for at least quite some time. He's a fine corner 3 in the league, in my opinion, and it's still a good athlete to have as a depth piece. And if you look at some of the other picks that went there in the top 10, I think most notably Justin Herbert could have been a Detroit Lion if they were going to eventually trade Matthew Stafford, which they did not long after this draft. I really debated here who I wanted to go with the Chicago Bears, because I really wanted to talk about Kevin White, who's one of the worst wide receiver draft picks, and he ended up going 7th overall in the 2015 draft, and his Chicago tenure, 48 targets, 25 catches, 285 yards in 3 years. But I'm actually going to go with Mitch Trubisky, who they technically took over Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes in that 2017 draft, and they also traded up for him that year as well. Trubisky did not play a lot at UNC either, basically 1 year as a starter, and that earned him the honors to go second overall in the 2017 draft. He ended up having a record of 29-21 in Chicago, which actually puts him as one of the better Bears quarterbacks of all time. He was a Pro Bowler back in 2018, where he threw for 24 touchdowns and 12 interceptions. He was also the Nickelodeon Valuable Player, first of its kind. And then he wasn't picked up after that 4th year. He spent time in Buffalo, Pittsburgh, and back with the Bills in 2024. He set the franchise back a little bit, and they had to try to find their next franchise quarterback in the 2021 draft with Justin Fields, but now they found their real franchise quarterback in Caleb Williams. But I do think this set the franchise back a little bit, and he was definitely carried by that defense in the late 2010s team. For the Jaguars, it's an easy one as well, a team that's been picking high in the NFL draft for quite some time. It's got to be CJ Henderson, who only appeared in 8 games with the Jaguars in his rookie year, and then 2 games into his sophomore year was traded to the Carolina Panthers with a 5th round pick for a 2022 3rd round pick. Yeah, somebody that was drafted 9th overall was basically traded for a 3rd round, 5th round pick swap basically a year later. So yeah, that corner class at the 2020 draft did not do well in the top 10 with Akuda 3rd overall, who we talked about. Isaiah Simmons, who was kind of like a hybrid DB there at number 8, CJ Henderson number 9. So like I said before, AJ Terrell going to the Atlanta Falcons at 16 was a steal, but you look at Damon Arnett, who went there in the 1st round as well. The unfortunate situation with Jeff Gladney, and then somebody that was drafted by the Dolphins, who we'll also get to later on as well. Not a good corner class in the 1st round there in 2020. For the Tennessee Titans, I am going to go with Marcus Mariota. They've definitely had some bust draft picks in the 1st round since 2015, but I don't think Mariota lived up to the hype for somebody that was drafted with the 2nd overall pick in that 2015 class. Mariota was coming out of a very QB designed system there at Oregon with Chip Kelly, and his game did not translate to the NFL level. He did throw for 76 touchdowns to just 44 interceptions in 5 years in Tennessee, and could look a lot worse than he actually did. But he got off to a really good start, and then it kind of crumbled in 2017, 2018. He didn't play for them in 2019, got benched for Ryan Tannehill, who was a much better quarterback there in Tennessee than Marcus Mariota was at that time. And Mariota has bounced around in Vegas, Atlanta, Philadelphia, and Washington. He's a good backup QB right now in the right system. But yeah, for the 2nd overall pick, it set the Titans back a little bit, but they were very lucky to find Ryan Tannehill late in the 2010s. Pretty recent one here for the Houston Texans. We're going to talk about Kenyon Green, who was the 15th overall pick in the 2022 draft. He played 15 games as a rookie, did not play at all with a shoulder injury in 2023 in his sophomore year, and then he played 12 games for the Texans in 2024, and then was just traded for basically CJ Gardner-Johnson in the 2025 offseason, with some other draft capital on day 3 involved as well. And in that 2022 draft, after the Kenyon Green pick, it was Zion Johnson. Not much better than him at the moment, but they could have taken Tyler Smith, or more importantly, Tyler Linderbaum, who went basically 10 picks later to the Baltimore Ravens. So yeah, it did not work out in the Kenyon Green era in Houston. Really debated here who I wanted to go for the Indianapolis Colts. You could talk about Philip Dorsett back in 2015. You could talk about Malik Hooker, but right now, for what we've seen, I'm going to talk about Anthony Richardson, who was the 4th overall pick in the 2023 draft. Yeah, he was drafted 4th overall. He's got an 8-7 record so far in his career, but he's been banged up in his first 2 years in the league. Just 4 games as a rookie, then had a season-ending injury, 11 games as a sophomore in 2024, and then was benched for Joe Flacco. And the Colts this offseason brought in Daniel Jones, who could actually be their starting quarterback week 1, because Richardson has struggled with his accuracy, his efficiency, and his ability to stay healthy out there and prove to be a leader in Indianapolis. So yeah, maybe this pick works out. He's still just 22 years old, but if Anthony Richardson's going to be a really good player in this league, I wonder if the odds would be more in his favor if it was on a team not named the Indianapolis Colts. You could definitely talk about Peyton Turner for the New Orleans Saints, but I want to talk about Marcus Davenport, who they for some reason traded a future 1st round pick with the Green Bay Packers, as well as their 1st round pick in that draft, to go up and get Marcus Davenport. I don't get why. I don't get what they saw in Davenport coming out of Texas San Antonio to warrant trading a future 1st rounder for him. He did have a very productive 2021 season where he had 9 sacks that year, 3 forced fumbles, but for what he did in 5 years in New Orleans and the draft capital they gave up was not worth it whatsoever. And yeah, Mickey Loomis is definitely feeling himself after that 2017 draft, because this 2018 draft really didn't make any sense for the New Orleans Saints. But hey, they did take Will Clapp though. We're going to have back-to-back tight end picks here for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We're going to talk about O.J. Howard. You could definitely give a shout to Jameis Winston, but Winston did have at least, I think, better moments in Tampa Bay than Mariota did in Houston. O.J. Howard was this prodigy tight end coming out of Alabama that people thought was going to be a super productive tight end at the NFL level and could basically rival Gronk soon for being the best tight end in the league. He was the 19th overall pick in the 2017 draft, and he basically averaged 444 yards in his career per season. He spent 5 years in Tampa Bay and his last year in 2022 in Houston. He never had a season more than 570 receiving yards or 6 touchdowns. And they weren't going to take him at the time, but George Kittle went much later in this draft, but also another tight end that went 4 picks later, Evan Ingram out of Ole Miss, who was a lot better of a tight end in the NFL. And the other tight end we're going to talk about, Kyle Pitts, who went 4th overall to the Atlanta Falcons in that 2021 draft, which I said could be generational when we look back on it. Guys they passed up on: Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, Penei Sewell, J.C. Horn, Patrick Surtain, Devonta Smith, Micah Parsons, Rashawn Slater. Yeah, all the players that pretty much went after Kyle Pitts that weren't a quarterback were basically all pros or pro bowlers at one point in their careers, as Kyle Pitts was supposed to be this new wave of receiving hybrid tight ends coming out of Florida. A very productive year that year with the Gators and Kyle Trask as his quarterback. He did have 110 targets in his rookie year, was a pro bowler, had over 1,000 yards, but it went down basically ever since, and he peaked in his rookie year. He did have a very down 2022, bounced back in 2023, but with Kirk Cousins and Michael Penix in 2024, just 47 catches, 602 yards, and is probably not going to be on the Falcons much longer. The Carolina Panthers were also a tough team as well because they've hit on a lot of their first-round picks since 2015. You can look at guys. In 2015, they took Shaq Thompson. In 2017, they took Christian McCaffrey. 2018, DJ Moore. 2019, Brian Burns. 2020, Derek Brown. 21, J.C. Horn. 22, Ikem Ekwonu. 23, Bryce Young, who you could also talk about here, but I think he showed enough where I didn't really want to mention him. So I'm going to go with their only first-round pick that I don't think was super productive. He was the 30th overall pick, so a very late one back in the 2016 draft. We're going to talk about Vernon Butler, the defensive tackle that came out of Louisiana Tech. He wasn't very productive in Carolina until his last year, where he was more of an edge rusher for this team back in 2019. You could have also talked about Yetur Gross-Matos, who was the 38th overall pick in the 2020 draft, the defensive end, or you can also talk about the one skill position player that didn't work out on that 2019 LSU team, Terrace Marshall, who was the 59th overall pick back in that 2021 draft. But honestly, the Panthers have done an all right job drafting, at least in the first round, since 2015. And I know it's with a couple different regimes. Now, one specific regime that did not know how to draft receivers, or honestly had a really bad stint in the first round, and that was Bill Belichick with the New England Patriots. I'm going to talk about N'Keal Harry here, who was the 32nd overall pick in the 2019 draft, a draft that had some very good receivers in that class. He had 5 games that he played in 2019, his rookie year. 12 catches, 105 yards. He had 33 catches for 309 yards in 14 games in 2020, 12 catches for 184 yards in 4 games that he started back in 2021, and then has bounced around for a little bit. He played for the Bears in 2022, Minnesota in 2023, and did not play with a team in 2024. Some of the receivers that they passed up on to take N'Keal Harry: A.J. Brown, Terry McLaurin, DK Metcalf, Deebo Samuel, Deontay Johnson. Yeah, it was not a good pick whatsoever. And yeah, Belichick at that time did not know how to draft receivers if they weren't smaller white guys that pretty much played lacrosse or a different sport in college. For the Jets here, it was really easy. You got to go with Zach Wilson, who was the 2nd overall pick in the 2021 draft. This just outshines Sam Darnold, who was the 3rd overall pick back in 2017. Zach Wilson played 3 years in New York. He had a 12-21 record. He was benched for Aaron Rodgers in year number 3. He had to be the starter after Aaron Rodgers tore his Achilles. He also didn't have the best weapons around him, but Zach Wilson definitely had his limitations, and he did not have a good feel for the game, and his game from BYU did not translate to the NFL level. He was more so a combine standout. He was a backup in Denver in 2024, and is going to be Tua's backup in 2025. For the Miami Dolphins, we're going to talk about Noah Igbenogany, who was the 30th overall pick in that 2020 draft. The Dolphins have also been a fairly good drafting team in the first round over the last 10 years. And Noah just spent 3 years in Miami. He played 32 games total, but only started 5 of those. Yeah, he could not really crack that starting lineup consistently whatsoever. And that was a 2020 draft where the Dolphins had 3 first-round picks. They had the 5th overall pick, in which they took Tua over Justin Herbert. I'm sure they regret that a little bit. They ended up taking an offensive lineman by the name of Austin Jackson with the 18th overall pick. That was from the Minkah Fitzpatrick trade. And this pick was basically from them trading Laramie Tunsil to the Houston Texans. For the Buffalo Bills, another good drafting team team as well. We're going to talk about Kyer Elam, who was the 23rd overall pick in the 2022 draft. He spent 3 years in Buffalo and then got picked up by the Dallas Cowboys this offseason, but he was basically unplayable at times as a coverage corner for this team. It did not work out from the University of Florida. Now I'm going to really compare him to Jalen Tabor, who I thought was another big bust coming out of UF as a corner. It makes it look a little bit better as the corners that went after Kyer Elam also weren't great. Daxton Hill, Lewis Seen, Roger McCreary. But yeah, this is definitely going to be a little bit of a blemish on Brandon Beane's legacy. For the New York Giants, man, Evan Neal has not worked out for this team. Eli Apple did not work out for this team. Deontay Banks hasn't been working out for this team. Kadarius Toney hasn't been working out. But honestly, I'm going to go with Daniel Jones. The same reason why I went with Mitchell Trubisky earlier. Daniel Jones had his moments. He even won a playoff game for this team. But I also believe he set this franchise back another 4 or so years. He was surprisingly the 6th overall pick in the 2019 draft. They were desperate for a quarterback post Eli Manning, and they definitely reached on Daniel Jones. He had a career record of 44-1 in 6 years as the Giants starter. Like I said, he was good for them in 2022. They won a playoff game, and then he was rewarded a $150+ million contract across 4 years for basically throwing 15 touchdowns and 5 interceptions and beating a Kirk Cousins-led Vikings team during the wild card weekend. And I do believe he set the Giants franchise back, which means I'm going to put it as their worst pick. But there is a bunch of bad picks that the Giants have made since 2015. Easy one here for the Eagles. We're going to talk about Jalen Reagor, who was selected 1 pick ahead of Justin Jefferson in that 2020 draft. It makes it look so bad. Jalen Reagor in his career, 1,000 receiving yards, 86 catches in 64 games. Justin Jefferson has played 13 more games, but he also has about 6,000 more receiving yards and about 400 more receptions as well, and 36 more touchdowns. Jalen Reagor is no longer on the Philadelphia Eagles. He's currently on the LA Chargers, or at least played with them in the 2024 season. Howie Roseman has done a phenomenal job drafting as of late, but this was not a good pick. Honestly, he hasn't really made that many good receiving picks outside of Devonta Smith. Honestly, I'm going to shout out Jerry here over in Dallas. He's made a lot of good selections in the first round, but by far the worst one has to be Taco Charlton, who was the 28th overall pick back in the 2017 draft. He only played 27 career games across 2 years with the Cowboys, only started 7 of those, and then has bounced around since. Spent 2019 with the Dolphins, 2020 with the Chiefs, 2021 with the Steelers, 2022 with the Bears, and has not played a snap in the NFL since. And lastly here for the Washington Commanders, a team that's also had some bad draft picks as well, you got to talk about Emmanuel Forbes, who in his rookie year played 14 games, started 6 of them, and then was traded to the Los Angeles Rams 1 year later in 2024. They selected him ahead of Christian Gonzalez, who could be an All-Pro multiple times in his career for the New England Patriots. Yeah, I'm sure that they would have liked to have hired Adam Peters a year earlier, because I'm not sure he would have made this selection. Definitely the worst pick for the Commanders since 2015. You could also talk about Chase Young, but I do think he at least gave them solid enough production for being the 2nd overall pick. Another team that could have probably drafted a quarterback that high and selected Justin Herbert. So that is going to be it for me. I hope you guys did enjoy this video where I talked about every team's worst draft pick since 2015. Let me know if you want to see the opposite version of this. Do you want me to talk about every team's best draft pick, or we could talk about some late round draft picks, or maybe it's just their best first rounder overall? Let me know down below. Drop a thumbs up if you guys did enjoy. Hit that subscribe button for more content like this all off season long, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.